We've now released our engine from the crane over here. The engine is bolted to the bell housing on the transmission, and the transmission is being supported by the jack, and the whole rig is still jacked up. If we were coming apart, this is the procedure we do before tying the crane onto the engine, but we've just released the crane from the engine. As we can see here, there's the engine mount, and you can see it's kind of sticking out of its hole. It's designed to go into the frame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower the jack now and let the engine mounts rest into place. Sometimes when you go down with them, they don't quite fall in their hole right away, as this one is in its hole, but I'm sure the other side is still hanging out. Alright, we're on the other side of the car, and as you can see, the engine mount is not quite fallen into its hole yet, although the jack has entirely been released. What you can do is get a little pry bar of some sort, give her a little bit of some wiggle, and usually you can get her to drop into place. Like so. So now our engine mounts are seated. All we need to do is put a nut on there and we're good to go with that. The motor is resting in its position where it needs to be, that we can go on and hook up everything else. Now if you remember from before, we disconnected this whole thing as one complete assembly, leaving the A system intact. Now we're gonna back this spacer off. Our bracket here slides onto that spacer, and then we have a bolt through here, a bolt through here, and a bolt through there to put this whole assembly on. Alright folks, this is what we're looking at. This is our, I don't know what I want to call it, but I just call it a rest bolt as a guide. It doesn't have to come out, it just is, it's there to set on, to line everything up. Right there where my thumb is, that part is going to hook onto our bolt we were just looking at. Before I get too far along in here, I need to install this piece. The piece on the left would stay in the bracket, but it came through. It fits into a groove and slides down and locks in. Unless you slide it all the way up, then it'll pop out from behind. So before I bolt this whole thing down, I'm going to insert this piece and get it where I want it. Yeah, this little groove right here, it's going to fit in from behind, and this little flat spot will let it fit into there. Now to keep that from falling off, I'm going to go ahead and thread this on for the time being until we're ready to install our tensioner pulley there. Now to properly route our hoses, I had to split this, so our main AC line is going to go around this PCV duker here, and we're going to set this in place onto our little stud there. And now our AC bracket is in place. Now that I have that in place, I go ahead and thread in the bolts. There's a 10x125 bolt that goes on the back of the bracket, which threads onto the top of the intake manifold. Then we have a smaller bolt, 8x125, that fits underneath the alternator and holds this part of the bracket down to the head of the engine itself. I'm just going to thread those in, and now our moment of truth here. If we can see, you can see a little bolt sticking out right here. This is where our tensioner pulley is going to go. Go ahead and thread that out. And what's nice about this tensioner pulley is that it has a hexagonal piece on here that once you have it in there, you can grab a wrench to put the amount of torque you need on your belt. Now that we have our slide pin down at the bottom in its groove, it's not going to fall through on me. So I can slide this on, thread the little hexagonal nugget on there. And the reason this hexagonal nugget is like that is so you can get onto it with a wrench without having to get any deep tools in there. But before I get ahead of myself, I do need to put this bolt in place. Now this bolt is supposed to be a long hex, about 2.5 inches long, that's designed for the same purpose, but since this bolt's in there instead, I'm going to have to thread it in and use a deep socket to get that one on there. Now that I have my 14mm bolts torqued up, I'm going to move on to the 12. Tighten down the one that's under the alternator. An extension will get to that, or a deep deep wall socket. So I'm going to tighten our 12mm bolt here under the alternator, which bolts the bracket down to the head. Once again, be careful of your torque as you're threading steel bolts into an aluminum thread. Now I can go ahead and mount my tensioner pulley for the drive belt here. And here we are. This is our tensioner pulley here. It operates in this manner, and you ride it down against the belt to tighten it up. So we still have our little captive nugget here, or slide thing, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to go ahead and thread this piece on as to not lose it or have it come off on me. And then I can go ahead and insert the bolt, pivot bolt. Now I'm not going to tighten these down until I'm ready to put a belt on, as of yet. And I have the alternator locked out of the way like so, so I'm just going to loosen the bolt. Remove the other one, which I always make a habit of threading bolts back into where they came from, is to not lose them. Remove my bolt from here. Swing the alternator down where it belongs. And go ahead and stick my bolt in. I'm not going to tighten it down until I have a belt going on here. So there you are. This unit is all bolted in place, and there is a plug-in for the reluctor, pulsar, whatever you want to call it, on the front of the AC clutch, which is going to plug into part of our harness here, and the rest of this harness plugs into the back of the alternator. Like so, and this bracket is original to this car, so everything matches the same. Now I'm going to take you on a tutorial for the belts themselves. Alright, I'm ready to install my belts now. Ideally, you're going to have this already, the radiator in and the clutch fan bolted up. But for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to just slide the water pump pulley onto its studs just to get the belts in place. Once I have this in place and the radiator and clutch fan installed, I can go through with tightening them. We have two belts. We have a larger one and a smaller one. These belts are particular to Subarus with AC and power steering. We're going to install the longest belt first, as like we do with our timing belts, although this is entirely different than a timing belt. Actually, I screwed up. The shorter belt goes on first. There's about 3 different variations of pulley systems on these cars, whether or not you have dealer add-on AC, no AC, power steering, or non-power steering. So with this particular example, the smaller belt goes on first, and is going to ride on our tensioner pulley we just installed. Make sure you get it around both pulleys to the inner one. Sometimes it's easier to start from the crank pulley first. Get it on the back side. Of course, you're going to drop shit if you move too quickly. So now I have the belt around the back pulleys on the crank, power steering, and AC. Now we just have to have it on our water pump that fell out the bottom of the car. And that is a nice belt. I like the grip pattern on that one. You don't see that every day. And also, depending on your belt setup, is going to determine your water pump. This is the long water pump with studs. On turbo models and models with the square type compressor where the alternator is inboard, you're going to have a short water pump with bolts instead of studs. And for the sake of demonstration, this is being a pain in my ass here. I should probably just wait until I get the whole fucking rest of it put together.